Welcome, everyone, to another edition to the Action Sci-Fi Fantasy Creators Lounge. I am your host, Barry Gaines of Gaines Entertainment, as well as the writer and director and creator and action coordinator of the hit series A World of Worlds that you can see on Amazon Prime, Google Play, BingeHorror.com, SoFi.tv, and soon to be Green Apple Entertainment. And today I have somebody who is a credit to our genre. This gentleman actually has been writing sci-fi books for a long time. Afrofuturism is his specialty and is fantastic. So, hey, give it up for my man, Milton Davis. Milton, what's up, brother? How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. How you doing, man?
I think people really want to know a little more about the author. A lot of authors don't like to talk. I think you're an exception.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more sociable than most.
Right. Exactly. So I want people to know a little more about you. But before we get into all that, let's get into like how you started this. How did you start writing or even getting into the whole world of like sci-fi action, especially Afrofuturism?
Well, I've dabbled in writing for a long time. From elementary school up to now. But in the beginning, I really never thought of it as being anything serious. I come from a small town in Columbus, and, I was encouraged to write, but it was more like of a thing where, that's cute, baby, but, one day you're gonna have to get a real job, something like that, so it wasn't looked at something that you would do. So I kind of handled it that way. And when I got in college, I had an instructor who, I was a chemistry major in college, and I had an English instructor who liked the way I write, and she basically called me to her office one day and said, "Look, why are you doing a major in chemistry? You should be a writer." And I said, "Well, writers don't make any money." So that's when she kind of set about to try to convince me to change my major. And she was the one that introduced me into science fiction.
Oh, that's nice.
And she introduced me to the classic, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, different people like that, and I'm reading these people. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then she started, encouraging me to write stuff. She said, well, why don't you try writing your hand at this? So I would write stuff and I would give it to her, and she would read it and she'd critique it and stuff like that. So
do you want to give her a shout out?
Yeah, that was Anna Holloway. I really feel funny calling her Anna.
Anna, hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel funny calling her Anna because I called her Miss Holloway for so long. So I feel like I'm breaking the rules sometimes when I call her Anna.
Yeah, because she's a teacher, yeah.
But yeah, she got me started. After I finished college, I dabbled with it a little bit. I went through the traditional route that most people went. I wrote. I sent it out to publishers. I went from getting form rejections to where the publishers were actually reading my stuff, and they were getting back in contact with me saying, hey, we like this, is pretty good, but it's not for our particular magazine. Why don't you try this person and that person? But then life got in the way. I was married at the time. We started having kids and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And when I turned 45, I kind of made this, I said, look, this is the way I actually said, I said, you probably got more years behind you than you got ahead of you. What is the one thing that you haven't done yet that you always wanted to do? And that was writing. So at the time, self-publishing was starting to become pretty popular. Print on demand was becoming pretty popular. I kind of studied the market, and I realized that what I wanted to write, which was African-based, African-American based science fiction and fantasy, was something that wasn't really popular with publishers. And so I was like, well, this is going to be a struggle. And I realized that was probably some of the reasons why I wasn't getting published back in the day, because I was writing stories with Black main characters, and people just didn't get into it. They didn't feel like they could sell that. So I said, well, look, I'm just going to do it myself. I had my own business a few years ago, and I wanted to kind of get back into that too. So I said I was going to do it myself. So I took 3 years of writing. From 2005 to 2008, I didn't do anything but write. And I wrote 3 novels at the time. After I got those done, that's when I started publishing. It was like in 2008. So it's been like about 12 years since.
What was the hardest thing about just starting, to publish your own material? I mean, it wasn't like you just went out there and said, hey, I want to publish and it was all good. I mean, how did you get to even, do that? I mean, it sounds expensive.
Well, I was lucky. I mean, I'll be honest. I got a good job, so I made decent money. So so the money part of it, it wasn't really a struggle to get started. What was really the challenge was that I really didn't know how to go about it. Other than I studied it, but I really didn't know how to go about it. And I got to give props to his brother named Marcus Williams. Marcus owns a black bookstore in Atlanta called Nubian Bookstore.
Marcus.
And I literally just walked into his store and said, hey, man, my name is Milton Davis. I plan on writing science fiction and fantasy. When I got my book done, will you sell it? He looked at me and said, hey, so he said, who's going to format the book for you? I said, I don't know. He went to his card file, gave me a guy's name and said, call this guy. He said, who's going to do your cover for you? I said, I don't know. He went and got another card, said, call this guy. And he said, now, when you got your book done, bring it to me. I'll give you a date to come in and do a book signing and selling and stuff like that. So he literally just kind of held my hand through the whole process. And I still do business with him to this day. I still sell books through his store to this day.
How long ago was this?
This was when I first started writing in 2005, Wow. And a matter of fact, I think his store had only been open a few years when we did that. So, I've been working with him since then. He was really the person that kind of kept me from hitting some of those pitfalls that you hit when you're a writer, with people, scamming you on editing and all that kind of stuff like that. He gave me people who were doing the job, and then they gave me advice because they had published other people before, helped other people publish. So they say, okay, man, you don't want a book that's going to be this long because you're a new writer. They gave me all kind of advice like that. So, I had a great start doing it and stuff.
Oh, that's good. I mean, you got lucky.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, to do anything and all of a sudden just to have someone, just be behind you right away.
Oh yeah.
Any field is tough. So, that's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you actually start writing the stories, do you have a prep? Do you have like do you find inspiration in one major spot, or you just kind of look around? Do you have a thing to kind of get you, get the juices going?
When I first started, I was really focused on doing something that was based in African diaspora culture and the tradition. In the 90s, I went through what I call my Black Renaissance. I started studying Black history because at that point I was like, I know a lot about European history because I'm raised in the United States and that's what we're taught. But I don't know that much about African history. So I said, I'm going to just jump into it and learn everything I can about African history. And I went all out, not just with the books. I was like wearing kufis and, kente vests and stuff like that, And I go out and, some of the Muslim guys thought I was Muslim because I had my kufi on, all that kind of stuff, I mean, I was like hardcore into it and stuff,
Cool.
and that's where a lot of the inspiration came from. But it was one book that I read. I was in the process of doing my research, and they actually had this book in the history section. But what it was a historical fiction novel. It was called Segu by Maurice Condé. And it's a Black woman from the Caribbean, and she basically wrote a historical fiction novel based in the kingdom of Segu in Africa during the early 19th century. And it just blew me away because that's what I wanted to do. I was like, this is it right here. I never read historical fiction based in Africa. And it was just like, oh man, this is amazing. So that was the book that kind of gave me the energy and kind of helped me form what I wanted to do. And later on, when I finally sat down to do it, the first book that I wrote was an African-based fantasy, which is it was Meji. And it was kind of like, I called it my homage to the ancestors, because I basically took inspiration from different African cultures. I based all the different people and the cultures in the book from different cultures in Africa, and I just kind of put the story together. And it was basically supposed to be an origin story of an African culture. That's what Meji is supposed to be. If it's basically if this culture really existed, and you asked the people of that culture, how did your people come to be? Meji would be the story that they would tell you. And so that was what Major was supposed to be all about. And it just kind of just took off from there.
Now, when you started to write the books, how was the responses from it? Because I know that you said you know this is what you want to do. So I assume there wasn't too many Afrofuturism writers hanging around your house or hanging around your neighborhood. You had to kind of like go out there and search, right? Go do all the minutia and try to find someone like, oh, okay. So when you started doing that, did people automatically say, hey, this is different? Even the people that were already in the genre, Afrofuturism genre, how did they take to you?
Well, in the beginning of it, when I first wrote the book, I was basically dealing with people who, most of the people I was talking to didn't read science fiction and fantasy. Right. So it was people close to me and stuff. And so, I just sat down and I wrote this book. And I have to tell this one story. Is my father was the first person to read the manuscript. And my father was a voracious reader. Grew up in Seal, Alabama, back in the day, born in the 20s, didn't finish high school, joined the Marines. After he got the Marines, got his GED, but he always read. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have the internet. We had encyclopedias. Right. He read the entire World Book Encyclopedia, all that kind of stuff. So he was always reading stuff. So I said, well, Dad, check this out. So I gave him the manuscript. And came back a few weeks later, and I said, well, Dad, what you think about the book? He said, you wrote this, right? And I said, yeah. He said, you didn't take this from anybody, did you? And I said, no. He said, because this is pretty good.
That's awesome.
So it was kind of,
you believe you did it.
Yeah, you wrote this. Exactly. So, the first people that I encountered were people who really had never read the genre before, but I got good feedback from it. But the most important feedback I got was from Charles Saunders. If you're familiar with Sword and Sorcery, Charles was the first person to create a Black character in Sword and Sorcery called Morrow, and he created them back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he's like among the hardcore Sword and Sorcery people. He is very well respected for creating that character because the stories are it's not only a Black character, the stories are very good. Some people say Charles books are as good or better than Robert E. Howard Conan stories, and I would agree with them. So we met through a mutual friend, and we started talking and stuff. And I was very nervous about, this is a guy who's got this reputation and stuff. I was scared to ask him to read my manuscript, but finally I said, well, Charles, would you take a look at this manuscript and tell you what you think? He said, yeah, I'll take a look at it. So I'm waiting to hear from him. And the guy that we knew, the mutual friend we knew, he was helping Charles publish a book. And he said, Milt, I'm going to send you this email. I think you might want to read this. So I read the email. It was from Charles to him. And he said, well, I know I was supposed to get you this book this time before now, but I've been reading this book by Milton Davis called Meji, and it's really good. And I'm running around the house like, Charles likes my book. Charles likes
Yeah, Charles. We're all still 10 years old, man.
Yeah, he was my validation, basically. And, but from that point, I kind of had the confidence that what I was doing was at a level that people would enjoy it and would like to read it. So from that point on, I was doing book signings in the city of Atlanta, getting in front of people who like science fiction and fantasy when I could. But basically, I was just going to general audiences and selling my books and stuff, Eventually, I started doing the conventions and stuff like that. And that's how I started getting to the real science fiction and fantasy fans. And they liked the books as well. So that just kind of kept going from there.
Now, do you have any plans on actually making your book into any live action or animation? Did you ever get approached for that?
I haven't been approached by any big studios, but I am working with some people who are in the process of doing that. One of my books, Amber in the Hidden City, is being shopped around right now as a podcast and an animation series. Another one of my books, From Here to Timbuktu, I'm actually working with brother Durante Avaloy. He has an animation studio in Atlanta called Avaloy Studios, and he's actually done a short trailer of the of From Here to Timbuktu, and he's shopping that around right now. Oh, nice. And then there's a project that I'm working with my own team called Playing the Odds, which is a cyberpunk animation series that we're working on right now. So there's some things that we're doing ourselves, and then there's some things that I got people out there pitching as well. So,
so is that something you really get interested in, to actually get your story onto the screen or onto someone's device, in an animation or real life series? Is that something that you say, hey, listen, either this would be good to do? Is it something that you really want to do, or you just kind of just want to kind of fill it out first and see what happens?
Well, I tell people I had my small ideal, which is basically, write your books, publish them, be happy with them.
Yeah, that's not small, man. That's big.
Well, for me, it was like, this is all I want to do. Get them out there. If I end up making a little bit of money once a month to kind of like pay a bill when I'm retired, that'll be cool too. Well, maybe I got the power bill this month.
Now, you said too, and I understand this wholeheartedly. Like you're around some people who just don't look at or read science fiction or fantasy, right?
Yeah.
But being that people know who you are, your friends, family, whatever, did you turn some people? Are people now looking at sci-fi and fantasy differently in action? Because sometimes they always look at that genre as if, it's for 10-year-old kids, and they don't understand the complexity it is to kind of build these worlds and what it takes to world build, especially when it comes down to making a novel on top of that.
Yeah, there have been some people, and that's been the beauty of it too, because I always felt like there would be more Black people in science fiction and fantasy if they found books about science fiction and fantasy that included them in their history and their culture. And over the years, I've run into people who didn't even give it a second thought, but after they read some of my books, they were like, hey, this is why I didn't read it, because it wasn't I didn't feel like it was about me. But I can read your books and I see these characters that look like me and that are doing things that I might do. I mean, some of my stuff is it's kind of like I explained our steampunk anthology. In some of my stories, the main character happens to be Black. In other stories, the main character has to be Black.
Right.
And so I think that, and it's those stories that people can relate to because it contains that Black experience or that African American experience that people can relate to, and that it gets them into it. My sister is my second sister, Ivy. She's like the second oldest in the family. She's always been a big reader. Only reads Black books. She was the one that got me really reading novels. I was sick one weekend and when I was in school, and she dropped some books by James Baldwin and Langston Hughes on me and stuff. And that was the first time I really started reading novels. She's a convert because she never read science fiction and fantasy before till she started reading my books. Nice. And now she reads my books all the time. She's always asking me, when you got another book coming out and stuff like that.
So people, that's nice.
Yeah. So I've seen over the years, I've seen the audience grow. Mm-hmm. I think it's because of the fact that, writers like myself, Balogun Ojitade, Val John Jeffers, a lot of there's a big pool of Black writers now that are writing science fiction and fantasy. Because the gatekeepers kept the pool so small. Now with independent publishing, you got so many writers out there, and each one of these writers are bringing their own fans into the genre. So You're getting this groundswell of Black readers and other readers that are reading the genre and like it, and they want to see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, once the internet started to really bolster, and made the world a lot smaller and get to a point where people can actually start reaching out to people with the same interests, and finding people with the same interests, not like back in the days where you had to do like the party line or something. It's different. I think that really helps everyone out. And, when you do these, when you write these, obviously they're not easy. Well, maybe they are easy to you, who knows? But I'm just saying most of the time they can be a little difficult. Mm-hmm. What book was the most difficult to write?
Ooh. I think the most difficult book for me to write, which is actually now one of my most popular books, was Amber in the Hidden City, because my initial focus was not on young adult and middle school kids. I'm basically writing stuff for like teenagers to adults. But what I noticed was that every time I did cons and conventions, Black parents, specifically Black mothers, would come to me and say, do you have anything for young kids? and I never had anything. And my wife is a teacher. Well, she was a teacher. She retired now. She taught like third grade. And she would ask me the same question. She said, when are you going to write something for younger kids? And I'm like, well, I'm just not feeling that. That's not, I got to feel it. It's got to be something that I want to do, not as opposed to I'm just going to sit here and make it happen. And finally, I came up with an idea that I had some interest in, that I felt like I could write. But despite that, it still took me a long time to write the book because I still wasn't really into it like I should have been. Mm-hmm. But eventually, I started feeling it a little bit more, and then got more and more, and so I was able to finish it, and it ended up being one of my most popular books.
So, it was there waiting for you, but I understand you have to wait. People, and it's great that people do give us ideas. They give you an idea, like you weren't really, you were thinking about it, but you're like, I'm not really concerned right now. But you know what? I think that's great. Fans, people of interest in this genre. Just inspiring us to kind of look beyond what's in front of us. And just reach out to something new, because there's something in us that probably just always ignored. And look at that, and you came to a point where I said, well, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it this way. Yeah. And, but you're writing, when you write, how long does it take you an average to even write a novel? I mean, 'cause to me, before we get into that, to me, it was always amazing for people like yourself, novelists, are just amazing to me. Like I could write a screenplay and stuff, but we have to, we could chop things up and make things sound wacky, and we'll correct it on screen. But like a novel, you literally have to parse your words in a way where people can actually visualize everything. So, it's much more detail. And for you to do that, what is your average time to even write these great novels, bro?
See, for me, I'm just the opposite. It's hard for me to write screenplays. The book that we're doing now, Ngolo, I wrote half a screenplay and I stopped. And actually, Balagoon was the one that finished it. Because I was like, I was like, man, this is so tedious. So and so.
It's so funny you think of that way, right? It's crazy. I'm thinking like it's hard as hell to write a novel. I'm not a novelist, you are. And the screenplays come really easy for me. I'm like, I can just chop it up. I don't have to worry about describing too much. I just kind of go right into it, But
you have to restrain yourself in your novels. But for me, I started out, my goal was to write a page a day. So every day I had to write at least a page. And it would take me probably about 3 months or something like that to write a novel. It depends on how long the novel is, though. Because like I said, it was a page a day during the week. On the weekends, I would write more because I had more time. And so in the span of, I wrote Meji. Meji was actually supposed to be one book. But when I got to publish it, my independent book advisor says, nobody's going to read a 500-page book by a new author. So split that book in half, which is what I did. And I wrote another book called Metro Force, which still hasn't been published yet. Because I'm really more meticulous about my science fiction than I am with my fantasy. So I had the books written, and then the rest of the time was basically revising, doing revisions, editing and doing all that kind of stuff. So it kind of took the 3-year process. So it takes me about 3 months on the average to write a novel. Wow. If it's a longer one, then that's probably about a 50,000 word novel or something like that. If it's longer, then it may take me longer.
Wow. I mean, I think that 3 months is amazing to write a novel in 3 months, Now, if someone wants to start doing this, want to get into, being a writer of the genre, they may already write a little bit, but they really want to take it seriously. What do you think is some ideas, or maybe some good ideas for a road they should take if they really want to get into this game for real?
Well, if you're going to do science fiction and fantasy, the best writers are readers. So the first thing I would tell you is read it. You gotta be into it. What I started out as classics back in the day, because there really weren't a lot of Black science fiction writers when I was reading, and that I was aware of. There wasn't any prominent until Samuel Delany was Black, but I didn't know Samuel Delany was Black. I'd read books by him, but I didn't know he was Black because nothing in his books indicated that he was a Black man.
They didn't even put his picture in the book, did they?
No, they didn't. And his book covers didn't have Black people on it.
Everyone always has their picture on the back of the book, but he didn't. Okay.
And he didn't write topics that were like specific to Black people. He was writing hard science fiction, So, right. But a lot of people that I know now who are younger than me were inspired by Octavia Butler. because she was the first Black science fiction writer that they saw that was writing things.
And a woman too. So I mean, that's
exactly. So I would tell people, if you're going to get into the genre, to read it first. You got the classic people like Asimov and Heinlein and all those people, and they're kind of problematic these days because of how they wrote. Today you've got people like N.K. Jemisin, you've got Nnedi Okorafor, you got a bunch of different writers out there and stuff. But basically read it first and write your passion. You're going to find certain things, that certain books or certain styles of writing or certain types of stories that tend to attract you more than others. And, so focus on those things. And one of the things that I was taught back in the day, they said, find a writer that you love, learn everything about that writer, how they write, everything like that, and then do the exact opposite of them. Because you end up learning the craft by studying that particular author and stuff. And then, you get the fundamentals down, and you just do what you want to do.
Right. Well, if someone did write, right, and they say, hey, listen, I got a novel and everything, where do they take it? Like, where would they go with it to even start this?
Well, you got two choices. I teach a class once a year at the local library about self-publishing. And the first thing I ask people is that, why are you doing this? And because the people who are really more inclined for being mainstream published, I try to weed them out early on, because let them know that when you become a self-publisher, you're basically starting a business. You have to do everything yourself. You got to write the manuscript. You got to get editors for it. You got to pick the cover art. You got to do you got to do all this. And then once you get the book all together, you got to sell and market it, Right. So you're doing everything. If you're one of those people that just want to write and you don't want to be bothered with anything else, then you need to look at going the path of traditional publishing, which means submitting it to a publisher and stuff like that. So if you're going to be a mainstream publisher, you got to find an agent for the larger ones, because a large traditional publisher will not talk to you unless you got an agent. And if by somehow they will submit, they call unsolicited manuscripts. Even if they do that, once they say we like it and we want to work with you, they're going to find you an agent, because that's the process. They'll go say, okay, we like your story, so you're going to work with this agent right here, and that's how you're going to do it, because that's the system and stuff.
Now, if someone is looking for an agent, especially being a novelist, what are some things they should be looking for in an agent as being a novelist?
That's a tough question. You want somebody that's going to be looking out for your best interest. Somebody that understands what you're writing, because basically what an agent does, an agent has certain publishers as clients, and they know what their clients are publishing and what their clients want. And they're basically either looking for an author that's writing that type of work, or they're looking for an author that's very talented that they can convince to write that kind of work. They'll say, well, I can get you a book. I can get you a publisher for this book, but they're looking for these kind of books. Do you think you can write that? And the writer may say, yeah, I can, or I can't, something like that kind of thing. So, that's the kind of relationship. The agent's basically your middleman between the publisher, They get 15% for what they do. Everything that comes from the publisher about your book goes to the agent first before it comes to you, And they're basically out there, promoting your stuff and that kind of thing like that. And your job is just to write and, do whatever else the publishers and stuff want you to do.
And they'll take care of everything else.
Exactly.
Okay.
As an independent writer, it's a lot more difficult, because you really have to research your marketplace. You got to find out where you're going to sell your books. Getting in bookstores is going to be very difficult, because that shelf space is basically dominated by mainstream publishers. But that's where the internet comes in, because the internet allows you to reach people and to communicate with them and show them what you have through groups and stuff that are online that specifically focus on science fiction and fantasy. Or if you can't find them, you can do like I did and just start your own groups.
Well, since you started your own, right, and you start putting it out there, where did you find? Because I know it's overseas and things like that. So where do you find most of your interest coming from? We all have a spot somewhere on the planet, and you were like, dude, they get down like that? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, what? So what's your experience for Afrofuturism, content,
The majority of my customers, majority of my readers are in the United States, basically. I do have a significant amount of readers in England. I do have some in Nigeria. The one that surprised me was Brazil.
Oh,
and yeah, Brazil surprised me. I wasn't really expecting readers from that. And what surprised me about Brazil is what they're reading. My steampunk books are very popular in Brazil, and I don't understand. They like steampunk and they like Sword and Soul because there's a renaissance in Brazil of interest in their African culture and their African heritage and their roots.
Yeah.
And Sword and Soul and steampunk kind of relate to that. And so, matter of fact, today there was somebody who had an article about a young man who had written a steampunk book in Brazil. And the article's in Portuguese, and the only thing I can see is my name, Milton Davis.
That spelled your name right.
Yeah, I don't understand anything else, but I see Milton Davis.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, the guy who wrote it happens to be a Facebook friend of mine.
That's awesome to see your name in another language. And it's the same way, right?
Yeah.
Is that crazy? Like, it's another language and you look the same way.
Yeah. But that's how I said that if I'm very interested in that. In the fact that the books are popular in Brazil, because I did not expect that at all. That just kind of came out of nowhere for me and stuff. But yeah, those are my main markets and stuff.
Do you have any plans to give more classes? You say you only give one a year.
Well,
so I'm quite sure people out there right now are probably saying, you know what, I'm in Atlanta. I want to get down with this. I want to meet Milton, man.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Probably doing something that would be, available online or something like that. Because I still work by 9 to 5, and then I'm doing thing with the family and stuff like that, and then I'm sticking the writing in and stuff like that. So the schedule kind of gets kind of crowded, So, but when I write that blockbuster novel and I pay off my house and everything, then I have time, to do more stuff like that.
And it's coming, man, and then put on the big screen. And
yeah, after all that stuff happens, I'll just pull up in my driveway in my Jaguar and
you
a couple of classes.
Just pick a car, it's there. You get
That'll be my Tuesday car, Hell
yeah, man. And listen, Milton, thank you so much, man, for joining me here tonight. I really appreciate your time, man. I mean, this has been really educational. I don't come across too many novelists that actually write, Afrofuturism. I really don't. I think it's very interesting, and I really want to have more. And just to say it again, man, you're a credit to our genre. You're a credit to this field. So thank you so much for being part of it.
Well, thank you for having me, man. I enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. And everyone out there, if you want to see Milton Davis, just go to his website. Hey, Milton, what's your website, man?
Our website is www.mvmediaatl.com, which is www.mvmediaatl.com.
All right. So you got that, guys. So I'll put it down in the description. So anyone who wants to check out the book, even purchase a book, hopefully. And do you give autographs, man?
Oh, yeah. If you order the books directly from me, I always autograph them.
Oh, man. All right. So listen, this man's autograph before he blows up, because it ain't going to be easy like this anymore. Sure enough. I'm telling you right now. So get yours, because I'm going to get mine. I don't know about you guys. I'm going to get mine. So, anyway, again, Milton, thanks, man, for being with me today. And we'll definitely be talking to you more. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, man.
All right, man. And everyone out there, I'll see you guys again. Peace.